Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today I want to talk a little bit about some recent news-ish regarding PlayStation Plus increasing its prices, and more specifically the effect that has on the digital landscape, not so much just that news. But before we do that, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you've never done that before, as well as go into the description of this video. You will see all sorts of social media stuff. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon. I really appreciate the support over there. Spreadshirt, as well as my travel channel. I appreciate all the support on all those various things. Again, especially Patreon, like for real. So thank you very much. Appreciate the support. Now, so what I wanted to do today was just have a discussion video. Now, there was some recent news about PlayStation Plus increasing its price. Now, this is not a news channel. This is not a news video. It's just kind of a way to kind of segue into a general topic about the digital landscape we are currently entering in not only the video game industry, but the entertainment industry as a whole, with films, things like Disney Plus, Netflix, what have you. And I felt like this was a good opportunity to kind of talk about it. So the basic news, as I'm sure a lot of you know at this point, PlayStation Plus, the Sony specifically, decided to increase prices for their basic plan to about $20. Their next plan up is about $35, and the next plan above that, $40. Those are the price increases. And so a lot of people were very upset about this, especially due to partially how Sony, communicated this information. They basically just kind of threw it into a little blurb at the end of something rather than being forthright. To Microsoft's credit, whenever they make changes like that, they kind of blast everybody with an email. So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. I'm not defending Sony, but I'm just kind of sitting here looking at both sides and saying, okay, what did you realistically expect them to do? So when you have a price increase, they're not going to go out there and like stand on a stage like E3 style and be like, we're proud to announce that PlayStation Plus is going up by $20, and watch a crowd go, yes! See people on YouTube making reaction videos, oh my god, it's going up in $20, oh my god, yes, that's been my dream. You're not going to get that kind of reaction. Why would you? People hate that, which makes sense. So you have to kind of soften the blow. Now, you can definitely debate that they didn't do a good job of that. That's fine. That's not the point of this video. The simple truth is the prices are going up. And a lot of people are like, well, why is it happening? That's greedy, this, that, and the other. Not really. And the same way to go for any sort of company. So let's kind of break this down. Again, I want to talk about our digital landscape as a whole. So the thing is, servers, employees, all that, none of that stuff is free. And I got news for you. Corporations exist for a sole function, which is to generate revenue, not to lose it. Now, in Sony's particular case, they're a successful company, quite obviously, and they're in it to win it. They're in it there to make money. And we could talk about that all day long with Sony and the PlayStation brand, but we're not going to. All we're going to really say here is that they are not in it to hemorrhage cash. Makes sense. And so the concept of PlayStation Plus and all that, the reason you would subscribe to that at all is that you get additional features. So you can go online, play matches with people, download additional content, obviously try out new games, things. You get it. You're not naive. You've probably got the service. Ironically, I do not. I've never bothered with PlayStation Plus. It never really mattered to me because I don't play online and I don't care about digital gaming. But that's the point of that service. So for Sony to get you to subscribe to it, they want you to do that, A, to cover just the basic costs of having to pay for servers and have to pay employees to take care of it. But they also then have to do additional things that you don't really think about. So every time somebody gets mad at Sony, especially about an announcement like this, there's inevitably people out there who are trying to hack into their system and do like DDoS attacks and try to shut down the services and all that sort of stuff. Shuhei Yoshida himself once had a quote about that, basically saying like part of the reason that we have to pay, stuff costs money is because we have to pay for defense teams to basically keep out hackers, which is kind of sad because it's a self-fulfilling thing. It's like they do price increase, so people attack them, so they have to do another price increase to have more security, and so on and so on and so on. And I'm not saying that is in of itself completely responsible, but it's definitely a factor as to why things get more and more expensive, which is truly, truly unfortunate, but it is the world that we live in. So that's, you have to pay for that, and you have to pay, Sony also has to pay for royalties for games that are downloaded. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but then we have to look at kind of the Xbox side of things. So Xbox Game Pass. Now, to Microsoft's credit, they haven't really had to do a price increase, but they did effectively get rid of Xbox Gold. Now, Xbox Games with Gold was, of course, the whole online concept, play online with your friends, etc., and it came with free games, again, digital downloads. For a while, they were giving you, I believe it was 4 per month. 2 were Xbox 360 backwards compatible titles that had no DRM on them, so once you downloaded them, they were yours free to keep, which they're not, again, they're not property, they're files, but whatever, you were able to use them even if you ceased subscription to the service. Then they also had Xbox One generated content and eventually Xbox Series X generated content that is tied to that service, so that the second you cease to pay for Xbox Gold, it no longer functions. And this is not news. You guys know all this. This is the history of it. However, recently Microsoft did change this. They got rid of the Xbox games with Gold program. The Xbox 360 stuff, no longer part of it. And now they got rid of the Xbox One/Series X content and transitioned everybody into Xbox Game Pass Core, which is effectively what I have. I actually had every intention of canceling my subscription because I don't know why I still even have it, which is part of the problem, but I accidentally didn't do that on time and I got billed for another year, so I was kind of face-palming myself there, but that's fine. So I'm stuck with Xbox Game Pass Core for a year. Now, I'm more familiar with Xbox's business model, particularly with this type of thing, so I thought that would be kind of an interesting parallel to talk about in conjunction with Sony's, because it just gives you a better sense of what the corporations are thinking here with the digital landscape. Now, this may sound ridiculous to people who have never heard this, but the funny thing about the Xbox brand is that it's always been a jobs program over at Microsoft. When the original Xbox, the one from 2001, when that system ceased production, when it was done, when it was all wrapped up, Microsoft was in the hole, net negative $4.4 billion. The only time that system ever produced any money its entire run was November of 2004 with the release of Halo 2. That was the only profitable month in the history of the system. By the end of it, it was a massive hole. So overall, the Xbox brand had to make up for that, or has been trying to. The Xbox 360, of course, being the follow-up, was massively successful, and then the Red Rings of Death fiasco that kind of cost them all of those profits. So going into the Xbox One, which admittedly was a decade ago now, in 2013, they basically looked at it and went, okay, like, how do we make up for this? Now, the Xbox One, this is where, unfortunately, Microsoft got a little bit more murky about the types of numbers they were willing to give out about stuff like this. Because rather than being solely dependent upon the console sales and the physical sales, you are now more into the digital stuff, which they tend to hide those numbers. So we don't really have as much intel on this anymore. But it's kind of hard to imagine that they made up a bunch of money on the Xbox One, considering it was such a disaster when it initially came out, and they spent so much to keep it relevant. We just don't know those numbers. So going into the Xbox Series X, it's unlikely they've ever made that up. So you might be thinking, well, I mean, they have sold a ton of stuff. They definitely have, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've made the money back. So we enter a situation where Microsoft has always treated the Xbox brand effectively as a jobs program, which is okay when you are Microsoft because you are this massive behemoth entity of money. I mean, that's essentially, they have infinite deep pockets. Now, again, you do sit there and just go, why would they be so willing to lose so much money on this? A, they have it. B, jobs program. C, eventual monopolistic takeover is legally possible. So where I go with this is you have to understand the way the Xbox Game Pass model works. Xbox Game Pass, as you full well know if you're out there, is not property to you. You have to have the subscription service, you have to download the game, and then it ceases to work when you're no longer a member. So you're effectively renting it, which is fine. I'm not here to make the case against that. I think everybody understands that going in. That's fine. However, from Microsoft's perspective, and I've talked to, because I've worked in the video game industry for a while, the way this basically works is when you are a developer of a game, and Microsoft says, come bring that game to Xbox Game Pass. The developer has no real incentive to do that because they're essentially denying themselves the physical edition sales as well as the digital edition sales, all for the sake of a very small fraction of somebody's subscription fee to Xbox Game Pass. So Microsoft, in order to get people to get companies to actually put games on there, had to guarantee the sale. So basically, if I went on there and I said, I'm going to download the latest whatever, like a Call of Duty or something, and this is kind of, okay, maybe that's not the best example because now Microsoft sort of owns Activision. We'll see how that plays out. But let's just say in the older days when they didn't own Activision at all, for argument's sake. Call of Duty's on there, and I'm you know, John over here, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna play the latest Call of Duty because it's free on Game Pass, and I pay my, you know, whatever, $12.99 a month. I honestly don't know the fee of Xbox Game Pass because I don't use it, but I'm on that service. That's great. I don't have to spend the $60 at the store. I'm going to go ahead and download it. Do you know who pays for that download? Microsoft. Microsoft has to pay the money to Activision as if you bought the content. And that's good for Activision. That's why they're like, oh, great, we're happy to have our stuff on there, because if some guy is downloading it just for, you know, the fun of trying it out, we're getting paid. We don't care either way how they got it. We got the money. Microsoft is the guarantor of that. That is an extremely expensive prospect for someone like Microsoft. Well, someone, it's not a person, but you get my point. Why do they do that? Well, the core theory with not only this with gaming, but as well as the digital landscape in general when it comes to things like Netflix, Disney Plus, and this is where we talk about streaming, has been the subscription service fee. If you can get people hooked onto a subscription service, you can slowly turn up the amount it costs, hence what Sony just did. Or what Netflix does from time to time, what Disney Plus does from time to time. And if you can keep them loyal to you, they'll just stick around even when they're not really using the service all that much. So the idea is, on paper, get people to stick around and just pay you every month for a service that you aren't really doing much with. That's the goal. The problem is coming up with different issues there. So as I said, effectively what they want you to do is subscribe and not really use the service all that much. That's kind of the ideal goal. Like, I'm actually, unfortunately, exactly what they want in the case of Microsoft. I did just accidentally pay my $60 a year for Xbox Live Gold, or now Game Pass Core. I never play online. I have no intention of using Game Pass at all. I don't really care about it. They got my money, and I don't cost them anything. Effectively, that's what they're aiming for. So they're unfortunately hemorrhaging because most people are not like that. Most people do actually play stuff. And so that's getting really expensive in general, which is why companies like Sony are like, we aren't a jobs program. We're actually in this to win it, which is why we have to do a little bit more. If you want to talk more about the movie side of things, like Netflix and Disney Plus, this is where it's actually fascinating, because at the time I'm making this video, there's actually a writer's strike going on over digital rights as far as monetary rights. The thing is, when it comes to content, it all exists in a triangle. You have the distributor on one end, you have the customer on another, and you have the content creator. So three, they form a triangle. All three can never win. It's impossible for all three to win because somebody has to lose in order for the other two to do better. So if we look at the gaming industry, Xbox Game Pass is a perfect example of this. So in the case of Xbox Game Pass, which has not gone through the bigger price increases yet, which is the key word, the customer wins because they're not paying all that much for that service and they're getting access to what they think is a great deal, which is a bunch of content, etc. Even if you don't own that content, that's fine. You know, you're treating it like a digital version of Blockbuster back in the day. You're like, whatever, I don't really care. I'm getting access to all these games. The developers or distributors are winning in that case. I'm sorry, the content creators / developers are winning as well because they're getting guaranteed sales out of their games. They're winning. You know who's losing? Microsoft. They're hemorrhaging cash on every single one. Microsoft is in the unique position where they are willing to do that because the eventual goal, as in case it isn't obvious to you at this point, is the most legal monopoly possible. Just try to get everything under the roof of their system to the point where you don't have much of a choice but to eventually pay their increased price hike, whatever it ends up being, because your options will be very narrow. You'll effectively have whatever Nintendo puts out there, you'll have whatever Sony has left, and of course Steam, you know, PC and gaming in general, but by eliminating digital sales, by eliminating physical edition sales, which that's a whole nother thing. Physical edition sales of Xbox stuff in general has already ceased production in various countries like Brazil and Japan, and I'm sure there's more to come. As they narrow down those options, it gets easier and easier to justify people being like, well, you know what, I guess I am willing to pay, you know, $50 a month for Game Pass instead of what it currently costs, etc. But so, as I said, the triangle, you can only two groups can ever win. Now, in the film side of things, again, going back there, the triangle is different. In that case, the customers are winning because something like Disney Plus only costs like $12.99 or whatever it is a month. I actually don't subscribe to that either. And the Disney themselves, in that case, the distributor was effectively winning because they were just kind of taking in a bunch of the money and they were owning a bunch of legacy content they didn't have to pay any money for. Film distribution is a little different because most of the rules that were written about distribution rights pre-exist the concept of digital distribution. So when Disney themselves puts out Bambi or whatever on Disney Plus, they don't have to pay anybody for that. They own it wholesale. They don't have to pay any of the original content creators because, well, frankly, most of them are deceased. But even their estate, descendants they don't have to pay anything to it because they own it wholesale. Sorry if you hear any sirens outside. Whereas you might have noticed, if you follow any sort of news with that, newer content that they create for Netflix or Disney Plus, the originals, which is their way of luring you in, say Disney Plus famously with The Mandalorian and so on and so forth, new content that's created actually has to adhere to totally different rules. So they have to pay to keep that content on the system. And that's where Disney Plus started to hemorrhage. The strike right now is about the fact that content creators are not getting royalties for stuff that is up on Disney Plus or Netflix, etc. They're just kind of getting screwed. Again, one party always has to lose for the other two parties to do well, the triangle. And so the shift always eventually comes back to screwing over the customers. We are the wallet. We are the reason that the others can do well. Now, Microsoft, as I said, is a unique situation, but that won't last forever. Who would have thought Disney, again, a few years ago when they were buying up every company under the sun, would suddenly be hemorrhaging money and be desperate for a revenue stream? So things can change very quickly. The point of this video is really to just kind of give you an insight into the digital landscape that we are currently in. You, watching this video, are in a unique position where these digital services are kind of in their infancy, relatively speaking, and therefore they benefit the customer because they're trying to get you a little bit addicted to it, try to get you to understand the technology and like it and use it, and then hopefully never give up on it. The problems they've run into is that we have, at least in the TV side of things, is there's too many services. There's Netflix, there's Disney Plus, there's Peacock, there's Paramount Plus, there's who else is there? HBO Max. At least Sony Pictures, to their credit, was the smart one. They basically said, we're not going to try and have our own service. We're just going to let Netflix, we're going to do a deal with them. That was smart. Although, to be fair, Sony used to have one called PlayStation Vue. Does everybody remember that a few years back when Sony was just naming everything PlayStation, even if it had nothing to do with PlayStation? Whatever. Point is, that'll probably get narrowed down, truncated, and then the streaming services will probably work itself out. But it's probably going to work itself out by being like, okay, maybe rather than 5, we're going to go down to like 2. And you can probably get all of them going back to like what happened with cable television, where they had separate packages and eventually it came down to like, okay, you can have it, but it's going to cost like $100 a month and you get everybody. Eventually, the customer always loses this type of thing. They just have to get you hooked into the tech. This applies to video games. So you really just have these are your options. I'm only really making this so that you understand where we are at this point in time, why things like price increases will happen, and to expect it to unfortunately get worse. I'm sorry to say, you, my friends, will be the ones who get screwed because that's how it has to work. That's economics. It always has to balance out that way. So enjoy it while it's cheap because it will not stay that way. It just can't. It's economically impossible unless the company itself goes bankrupt, which I don't think anybody wants Sony or Microsoft to go bankrupt. So again, sorry about sirens. That's them coming for me because I'm giving you too much information about how economics works. But yeah, no, it's just, I just wanted to talk about it because it's just resonated with me, and I saw a lot of people just doing the simplistic argument of Sony's greedy, Microsoft's not greedy. No, they're not. They're just trying to run a business, and there might be some of that, but they're trying to run a business and maintain it, and they're trying to balance out that equation because Sony's in a weirder position than Microsoft because Sony's in a more traditional one. They're in it to actually make profits off their hardware. Microsoft doesn't have to do that. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the eventual plan in Microsoft's case is legal monopoly. They want to have the ability to have all this content under their single brand. I mean, again, that's what a lot of these mergers about things like Activision are about. And we'll see where that eventually goes. But you can also, funny enough, look at the back to the television side of things. You can look at Disney as a potential warning. A few years ago, Disney was acting just like Microsoft is now, where they were like, we're going to buy up Marvel, we're going to buy Pixar, we're going to buy Star Wars or Lucasfilm, we're going to buy Fox, we're just going to buy everybody, it'll be awesome. And now they're hemorrhaging cash left and right because they can't afford what they did. They're not making enough from the income to sustain what they owe. which is why they were pulling all these shows. And the new Disney Plus shows, that like the Willow show and all that, got pulled very quickly because they cost money to keep on the service, whereas legacy content doesn't. Very little of what they acquired from Fox, other than like The Simpsons, has actually proven somewhat profitable for them. That's a whole different kettle of fish, and I'm sure a lot of people care more about the gaming side of things. But Microsoft, while they have far more money than Disney does, is kind of in a similar position. So they're gambling big on this eventually working out. Sony can't quite do that. That's why they're increasing their prices, and they're gambling too, because from the customer's perspective, 1/3 of that triangle, they look at the fact that the Sony stuff costs more than the Microsoft stuff, and the Microsoft stuff is offering you new day one big releases still for less money, and Sony is charging you more and doesn't give you that. So from the customer's perspective, you're going, well, that's obviously the worst deal. In the long run, though, you're helping to fuel a monopoly against your own interests. So again, the reason I made this video, I want you to focus on where you are right now in this point in time and try to see into the future and see that big picture coming up. This is one of many reasons I don't support digital content. I'm very much physical because I like the fact that I own content. And that's a whole different discussion. But hey, I'm clearly not completely wrong in that, because Disney eventually even saw it too, because now they're giving physical editions of The Mandalorian, as well as Loki and WandaVision, because it's a great way to make additional revenue off of nerds like me, and they don't have to deal with rights issues and all that sort of stuff. So it's interesting. The digital wars, as it is, might eventually lead to some sort of resurgence in physical editions. We'll see, as weird as that might sound. But I think that's long enough for this video. Hopefully you guys found this kind of fascinating. If you did, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before. And again, please support me on all the social media stuff. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon. Again, really appreciate the support over on Patreon, Spreadshirt, as well as my travel channel. The Patreon one too, I really appreciate, because like, we're starting to fall fall below certain tiers, and honestly, I could really use the help over there. So, not a pity party, just explaining things. But yeah. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you all later.